Welcome to another episode of Full Circle with me, Onyx. And I'm feeling inspired right now. Last night, I dreamed I was at a medium. It was like for mediumship. I dreamed I was at like a convention. And at the convention was like a huge bookstore that sold all different types of tarot decks and books on psychic abilities and then at the convention, there were like workshops and classes being held, and it was huge. And I remember picking up a tarot deck in the shape of a coffin, and all the cards were in the shape of a coffin. And the person was telling me, it's a really rare deck. And I looked at it and I could tell that it wasn't true because it was like on a ring. So sometimes when you go into a tarot shop, they have a sample of the cards like on a ring and you can flip through the cards. And some readers actually will keep all their cards on a ring and whatever, they kind of just leave them on the ring and whatever comes up, they read from them. And, then I woke up and had to go to work. After work, a new friend of mine asked me if I knew anything about tarot. He knows that I play in mysticism, mystical occult stuff, but he doesn't know what I do. And so then he sent me a picture of the 5 card spread, and it had the death card in the middle, and it was my favorite, one of my favorite decks. It was the Crowley deck, the and so when I was like, my dream was a coffin, so obviously it was a death card, a death deck. The person, my friend, has a Scorpio moon, which rules kind of transformation and death in a transformational sense. And my card has always been the death card. Like, usually, I remember when I first started my journey with tarot, I worked in a new age store. I was like 19. Like, I have different journeys with the tarot. Like, when I was like, it was just when I was like at a whole new level. So, anyways, I was going to work with the new deck and it was going to be I didn't know which one it was, but we had sample decks. And I picked up this one deck and I flipped through the cards. Like, I know I was going to flip through cards and I drew the death card. It was the first card I drew. Then I shuffled them all up again, drew the death card. Then I shuffled them up all again, drew the death card. And so when the tarot wants to talk to me, when the higher power wants to move through the medium, the symbolic language of tarot, the death card will show up. So my friend, when he sent me that text in the image, I knew I was supposed to read it for him. And he asked me, he was like, "Do you know tarot? Do you know how to read this? What does it say?" And so that is like reading the signs in your living life, which then now I have my own way of reading a simple cross spread. And I was like, I'm inspired. I'm going to do my tarot series again. I deleted my channel and I didn't want people to know all the secrets. And then I was like, yes, I do. And then I was like, no, I don't. The classic Pisces battle. And I was like, is this my ego or is there like a spiritual warning here? And then I'm like, well, let's just talk about this. I want to rant. I want to be like, so one of my friends, uh, he's really into tarot, and me and him have a connection over mysticism, occult, of of the mystical practices that we connect with, and he he, like myself, believe you just shouldn't be making tarot decks and altering the symbols, because those symbols have deep psychological roots and archetype patterns of the human experience. So when we modernize them to our current era, our era is the blink of an eye, you know, like versus like a long time. So when a culture or when a time period becomes legend, when so Egypt has become legend, and because it's gone legend, it's also gone mythical and archetypal, rooted into our psychology. So when we see a pyramid, whether it's just a geometrical pyramid, there's a psychological link to Egypt. Uh, when we see the sun, a lot of us automatically in the back of our minds think the solar disk and Ra and the solar worshipping Egyptians. So Egypt has offered so much science and in medicine, in all sorts of in agriculture. Egypt has brought so much as a people. The impact is still today, and those structures are still standing. So it's like a living legend. It's a living mythology, and it's so deep that we then even tie a future New Age mythology that ties into a possibly a past highly advanced civilization like Atlantis. Like Egypt was around at the destruction of Atlantis. So people, and because we're becoming technologically advanced again, we're going to break through those secrets that Egypt held, which was frequency, vibration, the chakra system, and all sorts of stuff, possibly space travel. And but so even our future is tied in to this focal point of Egypt and their architectural wonders. And so it really is like an anchor into our psychology and becomes an anchor past, present, and future. Um, and it's still felt today. There's still so much to be revealed. So it's like a city, uh, an empire, a civilization that offers hope. And it's even in Christian mythology. Um, and so that's how deep that civilization and its symbols and its codes have permeated the psychology of modern man. So we see cultural destruction, you know, for modernism, materialism, whatever it is that we're doing, and yet Egypt still stands strong and might be um, our last monument of humanity. So in a weird way, it's like everything dissolves. That last piece of us, Egypt holds, especially for Western mysteries. And it is said, it has become legend, that the tarot came out of Egypt and literally is the Book of Thoth. That's why the companion codex for the Crowley deck is called the Book of Thoth, and it's a whole entire system. It is the Western Mysteries. And the Western Mysteries uses the Kabbalah, astrology, numerology as some of the pillars that hold the system together, and obviously and ritual and ceremonial magic. Uh, is pretty much the foundation. As above, so below, is the axiom of an occultist. And it's really hard for people to realize occult science is the foundation of our science, of psychology. Occult science was the foundation of psychology and of chemistry. Uh, and so mathematics and astrology were always in bed together. They're two sides of the same coin. Geometry literally comes out of astrology. And astrology is intrinsically linked to calendars. And calendars are intrinsically linked to fixed stars and rotation of the planets and navigation. So I've always said, just to be a little bit of radical just for fun, is astrology will be guiding spaceships. And it sounds silly right now, but when you think about it, astrology was measuring the rotation of planets. And when we are on spaceships, the spaceships, the computers on board are going to be doing astrology. Whatever star system from point A to point B, and the time difference, the time warp that we are going to go through because of gravity and time and space, those calculations that is still astrology, because things are moving in orbits, things are expanding, things are contracting, time dilation. We're adding a few new factors, but it's already being used. We use the spin of the Earth's rotation to launch spaceships to get to certain point A to point B faster. We literally use it as like to amplify the speed, to like almost like a slingshot, to move something faster with less energy. So astrology in a weird way is navigating and is part of space travel. So we're using it in a very mundane level with personalities and foreseeing events, which will now move us into the next section. So the first big rant was when you're not understanding. Symbols just don't come out of nowhere. You just don't create one. You might think you are, but then you realize you're using the paints on your palette to paint your picture. Those paints didn't come from you. There's something we share as a collective experience over the eons, which is really cool because there's actually a card in the deck called the New Eon. Instead of like the Final Judgment, it's a new eon. And now that we're talking about generations, an eon is much bigger. And a symbol, which actually was really fitting for the card, is Horus, the newborn god king, who is the new, he's like the savior of Egypt. He is the reincarnation of Osiris. So Osiris was the god king for an eon. Then it's passed on to his son, Horus, for another eon. We see this same eon being the passing on of one deity into another in many myths. I won't go into it because that would just take us off the subject. So, in order to work with symbols to the point of getting the secrets out of the tarot, you have to go beyond the general interpretations of the commoner. You have to be fluent in tarot speak. It is like a secret language. So I'm actually just going to think of like Africa and their language, and during slavery and when they had to hide from slave traders and things like that, they kind of came up with their own language, and they had secret codes. And we also find this with the Jews during concentration camps. During that time period, they also, like, people who were getting them out, you know, uh, the other day I heard that there were German supporters that were trying to help the Jews escape, and they had their own language in their knitting. They had their own way of knitting codes to each other, tapping with the sticks and all sorts of stuff. And then we find that with possibly Africa, um, and the slave trading and people hiding and escaping. We come up with a language, and the language is relevant to the people. So occultists have a language, and it's relevant to them. And yeah, we can all beat on a drum, but certain beats belong to this culture. Certain weaves, like in a Native American rug, certain patterns, certain, like, textiles, certain fibers belong to a culture that they deeply understand. So I'm just gonna be intuitive and say someone could weave a medicine rug, and within that rug could be plants that cured certain diseases that the medicine person knew about, and could weave that in and give it as a gift, and when that person wore it, tied them deep into the medicine and healed them. So a song could be passed down from family to tribe, and could speak, just a drum beat could speak of many, many things. But that drum beat has been there since man in Africa. And we might not consciously understand that. But somewhere in our soul, that rhythm, that beat is there. Our ancestors danced to that. They fell asleep to it. Maybe that beat sent a code and saved lives, or so simple materials like Libyan glass. It's on King Tut's tomb. Libyan glass is used as a protective amulet, and I would say, it's found on the border of Egypt and Libya. That's, in my mind, that could be a substance that ties Egyptians and ties the Egyptian culture uh, to a heritage, to a bloodline, to how many Egyptians handled Libyan glass. Maybe what Egyptians saw the meteor hit and land out in the desert and cause a catastrophe. Who knows? Like the global changes. Uh, Maybe it was responsible for the era of the gods, you know? So meteors falling, eclipses are signs of the gods' activity. Like, and so that makes an impact on humanity. So we find these symbols that are universal, like a meteor falling, uh, could be seen as the gods arriving. It could be seen as a warning from the gods. That could be Zeus being angry. So it could be seen as a very positive thing and a very negative thing. But in all cultures, it's from the sky. It's from the sky gods, the star people, and it's from beings greater than ourselves, forces greater than ourselves, and it's having an impact. So someone born during maybe this one of these giant meteor impacts could be prophesied from such an omen. Omens usually have a dark impact. So it could be the coming in of an ice age, which was true. It could have been a meteor that devastated primitive man. And I shouldn't say primitive, but it's the only word I can think of at the moment that, caused an ice age and a total shift in the trajectory of where we went with mankind. We got lost for a bit. We got technological, we got stupid for a while, and now we're like crawling back out of the hole. So, how many times have we risen to heights of consciousness and then plummeted down? And, we attribute a meteor for the extinction of different uh, dinosaur eras. And so an era could be marked by a great omen. And then how does that event, that living event, turn into a symbol? And what type of feelings does it invoke? And it's so deep inside of us that it comes up as a psychic impression. You know, it comes up as as a living symbol that you're tied to. So we have universal, we have as the biggest is something that as humanity as a whole, we somehow all come to the conclusion of. We all feel it a certain way. So it's like a language that we understand and it has an imprint in the collective mind. So when you alter that, you don't actually alter the symbol, you're altering the message coming in. You're dirtying the message. Um, so you're making it harder on yourself. You're creating static. From the clear communication of that bold symbol, you're creating static, which creates confusion, and we lose the message, the clarity of the meaning. So we're making it harder on ourselves by altering the symbols for a temporary thing. That temporary thing could be man living in cities. That temporary thing could be gender rights or who holds the power. Like in Egypt, it was women. And then I would say we're already in the end of the white man era, after, we pretty much almost killed our planet. Who knows what's coming next? Uh, so even like 3 lifetimes is really temporary in the big scheme of things. The polarity shift of genders will happen over and over again. So why get stuck? And so a deck of cards represents everything, especially at a universal level. So when we don't understand universal level, collective level, tribal level, personal level, the genetic levels, we're not selecting the right decks. We're not understanding the codes. And then the only person who loses is us, the reader, and the person you're reading to. So that's kind of my rant on messing with the symbols, changing them because you personally believe something, changing it because a generation personally has a lot of energy on something. Um, and so that's kind of what I'm saying about that. That me and my friend kind of have an agreement on that. And whew, there's just so much. Let's just tone it down, come back to center. So we're really left with two great decks, the Rider Waite and the Crowley deck. And I believe it was, I think her name, I can't say her name right, Frida Harris. Um, Something very much like that. It's really her deck of cards. And when you read some of the Crowley stuff and you read into that, I can't remember if I read it in the Book of Thoth or it was Pilgrims of the Night. There was a few other books I was reading at the same time. But basically, it really goes into why she was making the deck, why she even came to Crowley for his input, and then how he basically took the deck to pay off some debts from his drug addictions. Um, so really, it's her deck, and she deserves the honor because it was channeled through her, and she wasn't an artist. this is kind of different between the two decks. And so we're running out of time on this video. I'll probably have to take a little break and get inspired again, and then we'll jump into it. Um, so the Rider Waite deck, uh, a lady in theater who had some intuitive psychic abilities, who was just very open creatively, she made that deck. And so what I really like about these two amazing decks is women actually created them. So and it's really interesting how men and women work together to birth these decks, um, and almost kind of in opposite ways. Like, Waite knew he wanted a deck. Waite sought her out, the artist, actress, costume maker, to make the deck. And he knew she had abilities to see fairies and things of not of this world. Her level of creativity was at the level where she could have visions and do the tarot justice. That means that in the occult schools, they weren't happy with tarot as it was. It wasn't communicating enough. And so it was revolutionary to put people into the tarot deck for like all the cards to really. So was the knowledge there? Yes, but it took a creative artist. Artists are naturally tapped in. Artists naturally are dialed in to the symbol system of the universe, the language of the collective. Whether they realize it or not, that pipeline is there. And so the universe can communicate to them through inspired arrangements. So that happened. What I really like about Harris is she, in a weird way, wasn't an artist, but went for it. She felt inspired. She was having visions and was struggling. She didn't have the technical skill, and so she had to kind of learn it on the fly and put it in. And then she seeked out. She was in Aleister Crowley's cult. Uh, and I'm sure my facts are a little bit wrong. I don't know if he's fully made the OTO at that time or not. It was a while ago when I read it. And I'm not so much about the facts, but the spirit of the information. You know, how many times does a book get edited before it get printed? So it's like there was an alleged romance and love affair and whatever drama to sell a book, maybe, I don't know, but the reality is she was connected and she was playing with the occult, and so she's getting it. But in this altered version, she is not, she hasn't spent enough time in art to do that. And Crowley commented on that. He was like, the faces you draw look like crap, and it's a reflection that you don't know people well enough and you don't bond well enough. And when we really looked at her personality and her lifestyle, it was true. Like, she didn't really get engaged with people at all walks of life. She kind of lived in a kind of like a classy circle. I would call her at an elite level. So it reflected in her work. And he was like, I'm dissatisfied, knowing that the tarot has to be a reflection of everything. So when you live a narrow life, because you know you have your people and you have your group, you've compartmentalized it and you've also marginalized your experience. So due to her own fears of getting to know people, she didn't get the depth of people's faces. And so in her deck, we lose that, but we gain something amazing in her deck that is clearly visionary. And I'm just going to have to say, once you work with the cards long enough, you can see her bright, futuristic. She saw the grid. She saw Isis's bell. Recently, I've seen Isis's bell, and now her cards make even more sense. And so, when you're open to the astral plane, so Harris had contact to the astral realm, and it's reflected in her work, but you'd have to have that type of level of awakening. You'd have to have so many layers open to see what she was seeing, to really her what I like about her is her vision. Her psychic ability was there. It's her artistic ability that wasn't there. But so it's a very potent deck. And I'm going to leave it here because it's cutting out. So let's all take a break. But maybe it'll give us a few more seconds. I don't know when it's going to cut off. But bottom line, don't go messing with symbols unless you have a full education in that system.